Hey, this is Jasmine. Have you ever wanted to know what is the latest and greatest of businesses, entrepreneurs, musicians, and artists around the world? Have you ever wondered, why did they make that choice, where they're going, and how can I support them? Well, you come to the right place. If you haven't heard already, I have some amazing guests all the way from Africa and as close as Texas, where I live. Check out Noise Zion podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and 30 plus other platforms. Today is my special Native American Heritage Month guest, Jamiann. She is a participant in many organizations of the Alaska Native Sisterhood, Tlingit Haida Community Council member, National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition member, CDC RX Awareness Campaign participant. She is here to educate about Indigenous lives in Alaska and the Angoon bombardment of 1882, the effects of the colonization of their people. She will also talk about the topics of her addiction, incarceration, domestic violence, intergenerational trauma, her healing journey, and how it all relates to the Native American Alaskan Native boarding school institutions era, as well as children being recovered and her cemetery work. Please give a warm welcome to ever blessed Jamiann. How are you? Look what I'm wearing today, because I know I was going to be a special guest on for today.
Yay! That's great.
Yes, so let me go.
Wearing the color orange.
Yes, ma'am. I wore it September 30th, and I decided to put it back on because in honor of speaking with you. So,
yeah, thankfully she sent it, because I was like, I don't know too many proverbs or sayings, but
oh yeah, for the Proverbs.
Well, it's hard, because as Indigenous people, so many things were stripped away from us. And so we have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true. It is so true. And on that subject, when I was a child, I told my mother that I did not want to speak Spanish because I thought it was a silly language. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, I should have said completely different or understood my culture more. So now I have to learn Spanish, and maybe thousands of years from now, I might be in the same situation where it's an unspoken language as well. So just an idea of having to give a child that decision, I would have preferred to make a better choice in doing that, because now I try so hard to understand the language. I can understand it, but I can't speak it. So it's really, I'm in not a similar situation, but I completely understand that that's where our culture is from, is our language. And
yeah.
it's really, if we don't understand the history about our people, then we take it for granted. And that's why it's always good to enrich a child's mind with the culture. I was thinking, like, the videos that you had on there was very cloudy, very stormy. I saw, though, we were standing by the highway trying to get as many honks as possible with the signs and the crowd to kind of like inspire and share and celebrate something. Is that like that all the time? Because there was times you had a video where it was like, the sun is out, I'm at the playground, look at me. It's so beautiful. When it comes out, you like want to run out there and like catch the rays as much as you can before it goes back behind a cloud. So
yeah, in Southeast Alaska, that's how we are. We get liquid sunshine all the time. So yeah, there's some days where you're like, oh, it's bright out today. And we don't really say like, it's sunny, because it's a lot of the times we're a temperate rainforest.
Mm-hmm.
But lots of rain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will never wrap my mind about how atrocious human beings can be between, amongst other people. It's like I try to find the goodness in other people, and it's really hard as time goes by and hearing these stories about the history of the children that were just engraved in you know, you having the September 30th where you are honoring those children as well as the children that have not been found, the ones who've been unclaimed, and the mothers who are still crying for their lost children. And it's like, it hurts my heart being a parent. As a human being, I feel so crushed by how people can be this way amongst others. And so, I mean, I've had in our culture, we have been shamed, we have been ridiculed, we have been tried to be erased from understanding our history and our culture and our language. I find a sister, Jamiann, here to kind of give me another side of the story and to embrace it and let the listeners know about this journey that you have accomplished. And there's more to come. As I can see from when I read on your article under CDC RX Awareness, that you had a tearful yet inspirational life story. Can you tell the listeners about your struggle and your success pertaining to it, like a little cliff note in regards to your article?
Yeah, the article with the CDC, there were 4 of us Alaska Natives who were chosen to participate in the RX awareness campaign with the CDC. And it is a prescription opioid prevention campaign that will be on for as long as the campaign is going. And I was chosen because of the things I talk about. And I talk about historical trauma. I talk about epigenetics and how there's a ripple effect of the past that is still with us today. And in fact, when my grandmother was pregnant with my mother already had her eggs in her. So I was in there too, experiencing all of the trauma of the day, the oppression, segregation, assimilation processes. And so I am a survivor of domestically violent relationships. I was an alcoholic for most of my life. I've been sober for 5 years. I am 4 years opioid addiction free. And I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and narcissistic and emotional abuse. And I held these things in for many, many years. I've been on this healing journey now for 9 years. And so I was 40 years old when I stood up and I spoke about my story. And just until earlier this year, I lived with suicide ideology my whole life, and contemplating, whether I want to be here or why am I still here? Do I want to continue this? But my son, I've got 2 of them, but my younger one, he's 14 and my older one's 28. But my younger one for sure is the one who keeps me going, because I don't want him to be caught in a cycle that is perpetuated. And he knows every single day that we are on this journey to break cycles and not perpetuate them. If I were to leave and take my own life, or just not even be here anymore for him in consumption of alcohol and drugs, then he would be put into a foster care system. Mm-hmm. And in Alaska, there's 63% of the children in the foster care system are Alaska Native or Native American. Wow. And this is, I feel, a continuation of the residential boarding school era. And when we look into that, we learn that when the residential schools started closing, they had all of these Native children, and they weren't going to send them back to their families. They weren't going to send them back to their homes where they belonged. What they did is they started a campaign to adopt a Native child. And they really, they put us on these brochures and labeled us as unwanted children, unloved children, and sent them out to prominently white families. And so, and that's what the foster care system is. It's a continuation of it. And this is how the Indian Child Welfare Act came to place.
Yeah, I definitely heard about that too. The Native American descent and culture that are just sitting in these fostering system, and then the point of that just outrages me personally, how they could do such a thing just to find ways to wipe the heritage of our children because they falsely label them as unwanted. And that just, I'm just like, I'm trying not to tear up, but I'm like, it's been going on for centuries. I can't say for centuries, but it is pretty close. I mean, from what they've identified in advertisements and ads, newspaper ads and stuff like that, where they've actually shown these loving so-called white families taking this child, and they make it sound like wrapped in a bowl, so beautiful. So, you can have your own child if you're not able to, but then there's a backstory to it. And these children, they have a family, they have a home, but they were ripped from their mothers and fathers. And that just tears me up inside as to years and decades. And, it's going on even before publication. It was going without, it wasn't even identified in papers. It was being done, going to the tribes and going to communities and literally taking them, and it's so, I don't know how anybody can do it, because I am strong, but I feel like if I was ever a mother that had to go through this, I would die inside. I would completely die inside. And you just have to be, it's like, so I'm sorry. I just had to vent because I'm tearing up, and I apologize. I'm getting a little emotional, but
it is stressful. And there's something called white saviorism, and that's exactly what you were talking about. And there's a superiority complex of, like, oh, we can provide them a better home and that sort of thing. But one of the testimonies that I've come across during my teachings and learnings is a person talking about them being adopted, and that it's like a puzzle. It's like this beautiful puzzle that you have, 500-piece puzzle that you're putting together. And you get down to it, and there's one missing. There's a missing piece of the puzzle. So that first trauma that happens, that taking the child away, that is something that child cannot remember. But I have a friend, and she's my dipping partner. And we go and we do traditional dips together, something that our ancestors have done for as long as we know of. And we go to the water during high tide, and the tide calls us. And so we go there at high tide when it's just on its shift and it's starting to go back out. And we go into the water and we talk to each other about our burdens and our troubles, and we release it to the water. And then the tide takes it away, and later the moon cleanses everything. There's, high cell turnover rates. There's a cold water therapy that we can look into and see the benefits of that. But how intelligent were our ancestors to know that if you're sad, go to the water. If you're hurting, go to the water. If you have an ailment, go to the water. Because of the high salt content, and the inflammation gets taken out. So my friend was taken away from her mother and adopted. And that's a pain that she feels. That's her first life trauma. And so for our children to be swept away because there's always this white standard of, we have to reach that standard, and everything below it is judged. And so our children belong with us. And we get labeled as, people who can't take care of our children, people who are drug addicts and alcoholics. And we really need to take a look at history and see, why are we given this label? What happened? Because our children were ripped away from us, and they were sent off to boarding school institutions. I don't know about you, but if you can imagine your child being ripped from your arms, And then what do you do after that? If you tried to fight for them, you could be imprisoned or killed.
Right.
It was mandatory. They took them. And then there was alcohol they would give you, so then you're numbing your hearts and minds with alcohol and then drugs. And then they give you the label of being a drunk and a drug addict. So coping mechanisms, how would you cope with your child being ripped from you and taken off to an institution where you know exactly what's going on with them?
Right.
And they might not come back because they could be killed. Some people came back pregnant. How did that happen? There's many things to consider when we're talking about residential boarding school institutions and the ripple effects of the past and how they are still with us today, and the policies in place still today that are taking our children away. Like we're talking about the foster care system, and where are those children going? Because there aren't a whole lot of Native families out there who are foster parents. ICWA that we had mentioned, earlier, the Indian Child Welfare Act, that is an act to try and keep our children with us, with family. But there's the ripple effect to consider. There's a lot of people who are not prepared and ready to house another child because of the things that are happening in their homes, because there hasn't been healing. And so to stand up and speak our truths is where the beginning of the healing starts. And that was part of what the Orange Shirt Day events were that I coordinated here in Juneau.
Yeah. I was supporting you 1,000. I know I'm probably 2,000 or 3,000 miles away, but I hope you could feel my presence in my heart with you. So there was one. Yeah. And I know this happened originally when I did introduce myself with TikTok, that you were in the process of doing the magazine? I believe you were being entry for 40 and up.
Oh, yeah.
That was how I originally met with you on TikTok. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to know more. You just have such a beautiful soul just watching you on your videos. And I was like, I want to root for this woman. She just seems like her heart is in all in the good places. And I just hope I didn't scare you off at the time, like some creep on TikTok, just like, there's so many trolls out there. And I'm like, I hope she understands that my heart is also in a good spot. And I'm so glad you were able to reach out to me as well. So
I am in all of my life experiences that have been very traumatic. I have real strong barriers and my flags fly up quick when I know someone's not of good heart and good place, but I didn't have any flags fly up about you. So yeah, and it was the over 40. I can't even remember exactly what it's called anymore, but I was in there for a while, and then it just, I didn't make it all the way. But the goal was to, $40,000 cash would have been nice, but that wasn't really my main objective. My main objective was to get that magazine spread, and I wanted that magazine spread so bad because
it means a lot. I know. I'm starting to tear up. It means more than that.
It's because of the erasure of our people, and to have a 2-page spread in a magazine as an Indigenous woman talking about our life, my life experiences, and the harms that have been done to us, and how we're, trying to find ourselves and our culture and our language, and find our way out of that horrible ripple effect of the genocide that has happened to our people. That was the most important piece to me, was to try and get that 2-page spread. Because I would have been in a non-Indigenous magazine, a Native woman talking about, hey, and getting the spotlight of our people. Because when we start speaking our truths on a bigger level, and start getting people to empathize and understand, or even just like, whoa, I need to learn more about that, because our schooling system, I say, breeds ignorance. It doesn't teach this stuff. And why would they? Because it's such a huge stain, and their mission is not over. They still are after what's in Mother Earth. Yes. They want the trees, they want the gold, they want the oil, they want the fish, and that's what they're after. Mm-hmm. And our people are in the way. They have been in the way. They're still in the way. We have water protectors out there. We have people protecting the herring here. We have people protecting our beautiful forests here. And their mission is not complete. They're still working towards colonization 100%. And so our indigenous resistance is exactly what that is. Something that someone said during the Orange Shirt Day event really resonates with me, because people say, your people are so resilient. You're so resilient. And she got up there and she said, you know what? I'm tired. Mm-hmm. I'm tired of being resilient. Right. I'm tired of carrying that label around.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. I mean, every single day I have to put on my armor and, I'm like, got my jacket and like, what do I have to endure for my community today? Because of the ignorance that's bred through the educational system. We don't understand that we're walking on, that we're living on this land that has a two governmental system. Mm-hmm. There's two governments, and it's not recognized, it's not taught. But our tribe brings millions of dollars into this state, and we do great things, not just for our own people, because we believe that all the people who are walking on our lands here in Tlingaani are, they're a part of it because they're walking on it. And so when our communities are struggling because the state system, shuts down ferries, and that's our only way to communicate and get around from one island to another island and get food and products and stuff to people, what happens? We come together and we reach out to those communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, and ask them, what do you need? What, how can we help? And we do like food drives and send things out by plane, or however we can, fishing boats, whatever. And some communities were like, well, we don't have a lot of Native people here. And it's like, that doesn't matter if you have Native people there or not. You guys are in need. Mm-hmm. So we take care of each other, because it's just who we are as humans.
Right. Yeah, and I just wanted to say, my heart to you, Jamiann. I see you. I see you. And I thank you so much for sharing that with me, because this is not only you're walking on that path, not just for yourself, but for the spirits of our, I keep saying our, because I understand. I mean, I'm the brown community, and mm-hmm. we have the similar burden where we carry on. Like in the Texas system, they literally just overturned, saying that they will not allow history based on slavery, that they are trying to find the education to not pertain to the history of Black people, of brown people, of slavery history, because they want to teach them all the things that the white person has done, the colonizer has created, even though they were standing on top of the bodies of my sisters and my brothers to get there. They just feel like they have to be praised for something that you talking about. It's not just you. It's for the community. It's for your culture. It's for, the voices that were not heard, were snuffed from their cries because of what they've fought for. And they always say they're resilient, but I completely agree. I am just everyday life things. And as a mother, as a single mom, people say, oh my God, you're so strong. You're so resilient. Keep going. You're doing it. And I'm like, I'm tired. And that's just normal day life for me. Just think of it from what our ancestors had to go through and our elders had to go through. It's exhausting to carry on and try to have that appearance like, we got this, but really in our minds, we're tired, we're exhausted from this. And I am so glad that you're able to share that with the listeners, because other people understand that the mask that we cover of our pain and our sorrow and our heartbrokenness from all the history that has been covered in with blood and with dead children, it's just amazes me how people kind of like put a blind eye or not even think about that part of the history, and how these people who believe that they're like role models and idols in their eyes, but they don't talk about the bloodshed and the lost lives of our children and of our family. So, I see you, and I thank you so much for sharing that information with me and the listeners.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm rambling on, but it's like I feel so much. It's so indifferent emotions for me. It's just so much. It's overwhelming. And today's society, everything's about me, myself, and I. And I love to meet people who are saying it's not just me.
No, it's all of us. It's people who look like us. It's people of color. It's brown, Black people. And what Texas is doing is they're just trying to erase more. Erasure with the superiority complex. And I consistently say that this epigenetics, which is a scientific thing, we're not the only ones walking around with the trauma. Us brown people are not the only people walking around with trauma. It's in our DNA. It is living and residing right inside of us. We took on this harm and violence from non-Indigenous people who were here to colonize. And those people who did this and created this harm, and they had children, and those children are living today, and they are carrying it on because they don't look within themselves. And because of that superiority complex, I believe they don't think anything's wrong with them. But there is. And it's humanitarian, there's this complex of me, and this is mine. We have more of a complex of taking care of communities, and it's not just me. I have a responsibility. So what Texas is doing with that, I don't think that they're the only state actually who is trying to not let our history come out. It's more erasure. And they're also fighting against ICWA. So the Indian Child Welfare Act is another thing that Texas is going up against, and they're saying that it's discriminatory against Caucasian people. When we can look back into the history and find out, why did ICWA come into place? It's because of the residential boarding school institution era that we had talked about, and how they weren't sending those children home, and there was an adoption era, a true adoption era. And in fact, I know someone who was caught in that adoption era, and he specifically was on a brochure, and his adopted mother, found the brochure on her desk. Somebody put it there, and she threw it in the trash. And the next day when she came to work, the janitor didn't take the trash out. And she looked down and she saw that and picked it up and started reading it. And it had that unwanted child, unloved child. And she called and she said, I want the one that's on the brochure. And so he went from the Dakotas, stripped away from his family in South or North Dakota, can't remember which one, but he came all the way to Alaska. And he's got, his own set of issues stemming from that. So he was caught in the adoption era. So yeah, the DNA we aren't the only ones who are walking around with trauma. The people who inflicted it upon us are also walking around with trauma. And I think that we're in a day and age where the discoveries that are being made, the 215 children that were recovered, because we already knew that they were there. So instead of saying that they were discovered or found, I try my best to say that they were recovered. So the first 215 children who were recovered in Kamloops, BC, opened the eyes of the world to the stories that we have been telling for hundreds of years about our children. And now you can't ignore it because it's come to light. The Truth and Reconciliation Act of Canada, it called for churches and government to bring forward all these documentations. Well, they did some of it, but the children who have been recovered have forced them to bring more to light. They withheld stuff. And in the United States, we have twice as many of these residential institutions that were set, to assimilate our Indigenous people and tear them away from their families and their cultures and their language. And I could go on and on about my own stories here in our community. We have like 367 recorded institutions in the United States. And you can learn a lot by going to the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. We call it NABS for short. So boardingschoolhealing.org, I believe, but you can go there and look at a map. And in the state of Alaska, we had 33 of these institutions, and we are the third highest number. Carlisle Institution was in Pennsylvania, and Richard H. Pratt was a colonel, and he had in his charge some Native people that he did an experiment with, and he took them and civilized them, taught them English, and put them in, Caucasian clothing and Western clothing. And he said, this can be done. And so he created propaganda and took before and after photos. So if you go searching for residential boarding schools online, you're going to see a lot of those photos. So they started in 1879, that school. And in the state of Alaska in 1878, the year before, Sheldon Jackson was starting in Sitka, Alaska. And the two institutions were very married to each other. I have the database of Carlisle has a resource database that you can go to. And I have found letters between the two of them, handwritten letters. In the state of Alaska, I don't think we really realize how institutionalized we were or how far back it goes or how impactful it was compared to the Plains Indians. But like I said, these two places where they were married to each other, and it all comes down to industrialization and colonization. You can become a member too.
Cool.
Become a member of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. Just go to the page and fill out your membership paperwork. And anybody who's listening that might be a survivor themselves, they send you a beautiful care package. So there's like a mug in there, and it's just filled with products from Indigenous people and businesses. And so it's really so beautiful to get a care package. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm going to do that for sure. So make sure if you have additional, like the links and everything, I will personally go in there and sign up. But I would also like to put that in the show notes so other people can look into that as well. That would be awesome. That would be beautiful. Thank you so much. So I have all these other questions, and we just got so wrapped up in these stories, and I love it. You have so much to share, and I just love listening to you talk about that. I know it's a very bittersweet, but it has to be heard. And I think not everybody knows this answer, but I'm like, really, I feel like I'm having an interview. But what, if anything, do you see when you visualize yourself 10 years from now? And what time frame are you thinking of? And what are your dreams?
I see more community healing that I've just been really busy for 10 years. And I also see place names being restored on Ha'ani, Tlingit. There was a place that we were at the other day when we had the Orange Shirt Day event. It was over in Douglas. It's known as Sabaco Park, and it's known to us as Anakya Andakanye, which means where the sun rays hit first. So it's on the south side of town, and it's on the southwest side. So the sun comes up over the east and it hits right down there. So it's a proper name for it. But when colonization came to town, all of these people, they decided they were going to, give these places names, which already carried names. And so I know it's a process to restore these names, and a lot of people will make the mistake of saying the word changing that name. And when we start saying that, then people are like, well, why do you want to change its name? But it's not changing its name, it's restoring its name. And so again, words carry a lot of weight. So when we talk about restoration, restoring names is one thing that I see within the 10 years that we're really going to be snowballing into that and facilitating more community healing. More people will start standing up and speaking their own truths. And the other thing that I see within 10 years is a trauma-engaged educational system, and not just for my town, but the whole entire state of Alaska. I hope it happens before 10 years. And in that trauma-engaged educational system, I see that our languages are the requirement to graduate, not a foreign language, because now it's set up to have a foreign language as a requirement. And I feel that that is a real insult to the people who have already been here on this land, and not just this land, all over. So geographically in the state of Alaska, if you're living in Southeast Alaska, then we should have Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian speakers in these schools who are teaching the language requirement, and also in colleges. And when we do things as a state, when we start having trauma-engaged education, and we have all these names that are being restored, and we have language requirements and all of this community healing that's happening, it's like that movie where they say, build it and they will come. Mm-hmm. I really think that if we do it, other states are going to look to us and they're going to start following suit.
Yeah. One of the things I think, and I just wanted to jump in because I just remembered, I follow a lot of, not a lot, but a handful of musicians like a Tribe Called Red.
Oh, yes. Love them.
Yes. And one of the things that I believe they were, I can't remember exactly where I found it, but they were creating archives of the music. And I'm thinking, archives of language. I wonder if they, that would be beautiful to have if they had archives of historical languages of all the nations, all the tribes that are, and use that as a resource to make it a stamp to be officially not considered a foreign language, just as to be, like you said, restoring the language of the history of the people, and to have that, like, for the children of present and future, to have that as a requirement to graduate from high school, or graduate from going from middle school to high school and college and into college and so forth.
And how did a country of immigrants become so against immigrants coming to the country?
That's
and
so
also,
hypocritical.
And also, they're not immigrants. Mm-hmm. This is North America. And all of those people who are stuck at the border and also ripped away from their family too. This is a repeat of history. They come from this land.
they've been here before, and now they're saying, this
lines all the way to Hawaii. As Tlingit people, seriously, we went all the way down the coast, and I don't know how the heck we got there, but we went to Hawaii. We came back from Hawaii. We have relatives in Hawaii. So here in Alaska, I say to the Pacific Islanders, sometimes there's a little tiff and a taff here and there. And so I'm like, can't we all just get along? Like, we're the same people. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we are all Pacific Islanders, all of us. You guys are just South Pacific. We're North Pacific. We're all the same people. We are people of the water. We all get out there and we fish. We're people of the land. We hunt on the land. We are people who dance and sing. We are people who have these shapeshifters in our history. People call them myths, but mythology. It's who we are. We're all the same. And so I don't know if you know who John Trudell is, but
that name sounds so familiar. And there's so much. Go ahead.
He has changed perception of reality and my perception of reality just with his teachings. And he was the voice of Alcatraz. So the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969, he was the voice on the radio. And then when the American Indian movement happened in 1973, he was there too. And so he is no longer walking this earth. But one of the things that he said is when Columbus arrived, he's like, who are you? And when we said, well, we're the human beings. And he's like, oh, Indians. No, we're human beings. But we got the label as Indians because he was lost. He thought he was India. He was in India.
Yeah, that I remember. I'm like, and I really didn't like the word Indian at all. To me, it's like a derogatory. I know people who are from India, and I've always had like maybe a conversation with another person and like, well, what is their ethnicity? And I'm like, oh, they're Indians. And they're like, oh, they must be Native. No. So this is just a whole construe of labeling. We are all human beings, and you're absolutely right. And it's so interesting how they also put us as labels, which I'm comfortable with, because there is a AAPI and there's a BIPOC community. And it's so interesting because BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. And then, of course, AAPI is like Asian American, Pacific Islander. But like you said, Alaskan natives as well as Hawaiian, they come from the Pacific Islander, but yet you're also considered Indigenous. So it's like, okay, wait, all these labels just get so construed. I just consider you as human being, as a sister, sister. So,
we get the question a lot, like, what should we call your people? I am comfortable with being called Native. Alaska Native. I am comfortable with being called Indigenous. When we start talking about Native American, then we start, people are just like, I'm not really sure if I'm comfortable with that, so it just is like, I can't speak for everybody, but I feel like Indigenous is a really good one to use.
Mm-hmm. Just call me Jasmine. My mother and my father named me that. I'm also a human being. The last time I checked this current life, and I believe in reincarnation. So it's just so interesting how people try to put you in a box to kind of have less fear of who you are. If you put a label on it, they're no longer considered a threat or considered fear of. And I've noticed that a lot with people who are not familiar with something. They just automatically label it. I don't want to insult, but the Indian or the red man or, other types of things that they would say just to label it, to not make it as intimidating or you are more superior over. And I'm just venting. So just let me do my thing. It's like,
it sort of reminds me of something else that was said the other day. Like when they arrived, they're like, well, we're going to take this part of the land and we're going to put you over here. And then they come over and it's like, you know what, you really don't belong over here either. So we're going to put you over here. And well, you know what, we're going to put you somewhere else now. And so that's kind of like the labeling system that's happening. This is who you are. Nope, that's not who you are. This is who you are. Nope, that's not who you are. This is who you are. And someone else is making those decisions for us. We're not sitting at the table with them making these decisions for us. And this is how we got where we are today. So there's some people actually who are like sitting around, how can we help these folks heal? And I love that intention. However, are we sitting at that table to figure out what our healing is for ourselves, or are just some random, non-Indigenous people sitting around talking about how they're going to help heal us? Because that's what happened before. People made those decisions for us. How are we going to save them? And let's start this schooling system that is church ran and government funded. And so, there's so much horror that happened in these institutions. But that's how I feel about the evolution of going from Negro to African American. Mm-hmm. Just like what you were talking about. It like evolved into all of these different names and telling you don't belong, and this is who you are, and that's who you are, and this is who you are, and this is who you are now. That's not for them to tell us who we are.
Right.
We've got to claim our own names and claim our own place. Right. And put our foots down, like Mom Jasmine. That's who I am. That's
the last time I checked. It's like, and on top of that, it's like, have you even asked what we needed? It's always an assumption of what they think we need. And that just floors me as well. Like, have you even sat down across the table, whatever the case is, and sit down like civilized people and talk human to human and saying, how can we help you? That's like the hardest thing that can ever come out of a person's mouth in these instances throughout history. How can we help you? Instead of saying, let's see what they really want. Okay, the way we do our tradition is we put them through boarding school, and we think that's how it's going to work. No, it's that's just other thing that upsets me. Like, he never really sat down and actually understood each other, and that's how it is now. We never sit down to understand each other. So
that's how we've been conditioned.
I think I'm out of that mold. I cut my heart and my soul out of that mold and reshape and saying, I'm not going to be like the norm. I want to know who you are. And I want a lot of the listeners to kind of rethink and step back as to self-awareness, as well as loving yourself and other people as humans, and in asking that question, how can I help you? So simple, but it's so complicated in today's world. So
what happened with the group of people that I was talking about, it's like, what we don't need is a bunch of non-native people sitting around figuring out how they're going to help us heal without having our voices at the table. And then I talked about white saviorism and superiority complexes. And that was a hard conversation for me to just be like, hey, look, there's this thing you need to consider. And it actually went across really well. They took time to reflect and respond, and the response is, you know what, I've been guilty of this and it doesn't align with my core values. What do you need from us to facilitate more healing? Wow. And so the intention that I originally was like, I like the intention, but this is how we got here. But the intention was so genuine and self-reflective, and they were able to look at themselves and that DNA that I'm talking about, because they were trying to perpetuate a cycle. It takes so much to stand up to that and just be like, hang on, I'm not comfortable with this because this is why.
Mm-hmm.
So the Alaska Native Sisterhood Camp too, I feel like this in general has been quite quietly sort of surviving in the background. Alaska Native Brotherhood was formed in 1912, and then Alaska Native Sisterhood was formed in 1915. However, without the women, the Brotherhood wasn't going to be able to get to the places where they needed to be. The women were the ones who were doing fundraisers and having bake sales and doing all of these things to get the men where they needed to go in order to fight for our rights. There's one woman in particular, her name is Marie Orson, and she was known as Mary Moon. And her mother passed away, and her father moved from, I believe, Cluckwan to Juneau to Douglas, and he was seen purchasing some items in a store and some girls' clothing when a couple of Quakers saw him and started, I feel, interrogating him, like, why are you purchasing that? Then people say they were asking questions, make it sound nice. Why are you purchasing that stuff for little girls? And he said that he's a widower and he's got a couple kids, and I've heard the story of them saying, well, I'm not sure how it happened, but they convinced him to let them take the children and educate them. But I know very well at the time that missionaries would come through and they would see children and be like, I like that one, I'm taking that one. And they would take them. Her name was, I think it was Katsa. And then they changed her name to Mary Moon, and they sent her off to Carlisle Industrial School in Pennsylvania. And when she was there, she was still known as Mary Moon, but later she graduated from Carlisle Institute and she returned back to Alaska, and she married a man named Ole. And so she started going by Marie Orson, and she passed away in 1918. So just a few years after the sisterhood. But through my investigations, I have found that she was one of the founding brothers. She was the mother of the Brotherhood of 1912. And that conversations of, we've had enough and we need to do something about the way our people are being treated and disregarded, and having signs say, no dogs, no natives allowed. So they fought against the discrimination, and those conversations formed in her kitchen. But with patriarchy, she is demoted to just a secretary. And so I've been trying to bring her more to light lately and talk about her. But so these people, our ancestors, were forced to go to these institutions. And when they came out of those institutions, they said, enough's enough. We need to do something to change this. And that's how the Alaska Native Brotherhood formed, and then the Alaska Native Sisterhood. And we're the oldest known anti-discrimination organization in the world.
Wow.
And then Elizabeth Paratrovich was of the same camp that I am. She was of ANS Camp 2, so Alaska Native Sisterhood Camp 2. And she stood before the legislature and gave testimony for that Anti-Discrimination Act, which was passed in 1945, so 20 years before the United States. And we were still an actual territory at the time. So yeah, she's led the way for us. And I think that she was just so strong and powerful to be able to stand up to a room full of men where one of the senators was just violently opposing this anti-discrimination act. That he's like, who are these people? Who do they think they are to mingle with us gentlemen with over 5,000 years of recorded history behind us? And she flipped his words, and she stood up and said, well, she basically just said that I wouldn't have expected that I, who am barely out of savagery, would have to remind gentlemen with 5,000 years of recorded civilization behind them of our Bill of Rights. That was House Bill 77. So she just took his words and just flipped them around, and she got people who were going to vote no to vote yes because of the mentioning of our Bill of Rights. And now she is adorned on the back of a $1 coin. I really think that she deserves her own coin, but they put her on a coin with Sacagawea, and that's controversial to me.
Sacagawea, yeah. I'm probably saying it wrong. It's Sacagawea.
She helped them. She was out there with Lewis and Clark.
That's what I was trying to say.
But there's a coin.
Yeah, I remember seeing the coin.
Elizabeth Radovich is on the backside of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is some power. I love the powerful women in history. Just like putting, I hate to say it, putting men in their place, but specific men who think that they can control the world and with their superiority. But that's beautiful. And I think I have, if I'm not mistaken, did you speak specifically on the Angoon bombardment of 1882, or have we done Angoon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One last question. I know you were preparing for it, so
I didn't tell you about Angoon, but I could.
Yes, absolutely. Please do, and then after that, we can talk about your proverb.
Yeah. Slinget kena zechtin aya achsai Blake ha kena Jamiann you hat duasak. Yethna hatsati deshitan aya hat Blake ka yadi aya hat Kagwantan Dutch kan aya hat. What I just said is my Tlingit name is Zechtin. My English name is Jamiann. I am of the Raven moiety and the Deshiton clan of Angoon, Alaska. So Raven, Beaver, Dragonfly is my moiety. And I also said that I am Kagwantan Dutch Kun. That means I'm the grandchild of the Kagwantan from the Eagle Nest House in Sitka, Alaska. My people in Angoon come from the Yechsagi Hit, which is the Raven's Bones house. My family is like the founders. They're the founders of Angoon. Back in 1882, my great-grandfather, Ankaska, was just a child, and he was on the beaches of Angoon when the Navy bombarded us. And so my great-great-grandfather went running down to the beach and swooped my great-great-grandfather off the beach and saved his life. And he went running into the woods, and this happened in October. So it was like October 26th, 1882 that this happened. And there's a whole story that goes along with that bombardment. And I believe there was an accidental death of one of our chiefs on a whaling boat. And at the time there was payment processes by Tlingit law, and so they were asking for, I think, 100 blankets of payment for the loss of our chief, and we weren't going to get it. And so there's two different versions of this story of them capturing a couple of the Caucasian men that were here at the time, and then another story was that those men felt for the people of Angoon, and that they went with them to the village. And so it depends on who's telling the story and who's recollecting it. I believe Mr. Merriman, he was of the Navy, and he was going to come and show us people, So they dropped shells on our village, and they burnt our houses and our canoes. And there was only one surviving canoe that had a beautiful beaver on it. And that was the canoe that carried us through the winter. And it was our way to go out and harvest and get the food that was needed, to provide for the community. And that later that beaver was taken from us also. And years had passed by where some of the men of Rangoon started filing for repatriation of these items, and they went across the country to go find them. And they went into one of the museums and they were told, they didn't have any help. They were just told, go find your stuff. And so they didn't have any direction. They were just walking around, and they said there was rows and rows of shelves that were covered with like a painter's canvas or something, covering these shelves to keep the items hidden, safe away from dust and stuff probably. And one of the men went walking through an aisle, and he felt like he was being pulled down this one way, and he just ignored it. He just kept walking. And then when he was doubling back, he was being called down that aisle again. He's like, fine, I'll follow my intuition. So he went down there, and then he was told to stop. And so he, his intuition told him to stop. So he stopped, and he just, well, let's see what's under here. And he rolled it up, and oh my gosh, it was the beaver. And so that beaver was calling him. It was telling him, I'm down here, take me home. He wanted to go home. So today that beaver is, it's in Rangoon, and every October on the 26th, they put in requests asking for an apology to the Navy, and they stand silent for 2 minutes waiting for the Navy to call with their apology, but there's never any phone call. Yeah, that's a piece of history that we live with. It's a part of my own family's personal trauma. You'll see some of our people will be wearing Navy stuff, and there's different stories that go along in different communities with what we wear and how we obtained those items. There's women in Huna who wear sailor suits, and I believe it's the sailor ones. Might be. Anyways, there was a story of that as well, where the women were the ones who were the warriors who went out and they took care of those men, and they took those, they took those clothes and they wear them, and that signifies what happened with that story as well. But that's my story to tell.
Yeah. Have they ever put in the colors of the Navy colors into the dressings? Like if they wanted to do, I know.
Like our regalia?
Yeah. Have they ever done that? Like they kind of mingled both things just to kind of create another story outside of that? Or?
I don't think so. No. Our regalia is like our state IDs. So if we go to our wallet and we pull out our state ID, and it tells us like, this is Jamiann, and this is how tall she is and how much she weighs and what her address or whatever is, it tells us stuff about us. But our regalia, it tells who we are. I can grab one for you real quick. So.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes.
This is a raven. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's who I am. Yes.
Yes.
It's YEIL. That's how that's spelt. So when I wear this, you know what moiety I am. There's ravens and there's eagles. And the ravens marry the eagles and the eagles marry the ravens. And we're a matrilineal society. And so my mother was a raven. Her mother was a raven. Raven beaver. I came from my mother, so I am of her blood. So I am a raven beaver also. So Daishitan. This one right here is, this is a beaver design.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Some leggings that were gifted to me actually during the RX awareness dinner that we had. We had a dinner for the people that came from Washington, D.C. to interview us. And we wanted to show them who we are as a people and how we come together as a community, and that we celebrate and dance and feast and things like that. And it was really such a beautiful event.
That sounds so beautiful. Yes. Oh,
And
look at
so
that.
here's
Oh,
the raven with the bones coming out to represent my raven's bones house.
interesting. Oh gosh, it's beautiful. That was probably completely handmade as well.
Oh yeah, my mother is the one who made these, and then this is the beaver,
Mm-hmm.
and then these are the season leaves.
Wow.
Yeah, so like winter, spring, summer, fall. Yeah,
That's
and
beautiful.
then I don't remember who did this one, but some beautiful flower work.
That is so, I love that. Now it makes me want to I will feel like I want to ask your mother for something like that, but I don't even know what my dressing would look like at all. I think I'll be a hodgepodge collage of everything and anything because I don't even know much about my background. I know specifically.
This one's the American Indian movement in solidarity of missing, murdered Indigenous women.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I suggest that you come up during celebration time. We have celebration here in Juneau once every 2 years and on even years. So in 2022, in the first, I think, week of June, we have a celebration that's happening. And I probably don't know if wow, look at that. I never
That is like that. So interesting.
But it's huge. And it's all felt and buttons. We call them button blankets. And red and black are the main colors that you see. And so you were asking about if we entwine other stuff into it, but we don't really, because this is our identity and we have like family colors and family stories and history that's being told on our blankets. And not only that, it calls to the other opposite moiety. So when I'm wearing raven stuff and some raven comes over, is like, hey, and I'm like, I'm a raven, get away from me, So, but when you have your identification on, then the eagles will come up and be like, hey,
and you're like, hey, back.
Let's go hang out. But
that is so cool. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. What is a proverb in your language that most appeals to you and why?
Since I'm learning so much about who I am and that I'm just, the first generation who didn't go to a residential boarding school, that's a lot to sink in right there. Mm-hmm. I'm still trying to learn. And so I don't know a whole lot of proverbs, but one of the things that stood out to me with that question was a saying, "E tu yeti," it is within you. That to me means so many things. So my strength is within me. My culture is within me, and I just have to revitalize it. And so it just means so many things to me when I see that. But the most that stands out first is that I'm strong and that I have so much strength and I'm just discovering it, or I'm recovering it. I don't even know, but I know that it's in me and it's coming out. The more work, the more that I become connected, the more that I learn about my culture, it's healing. So culture heals. I hope that I can be inspirational to other people to let them know that it's within them as well.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, if the listeners are wanting to know more about you, what will be a place that they can reach out? Do you have a particular website or any other additional information you'd like to share?
I'm on Facebook and my story is on RX Awareness. I have a blog out there that tells my story. I have Instagram too. Mm-hmm. I don't use a whole bunch of these things. I just kind of go out every now and then and post something, and then I just sort of forget it for a while because I'm out here just trying to do life and It's just every now and then I'm probably on Facebook more than anything. I'll just scroll and scroll for quite a while. And then TikTok is lots of fun, but I've been really busy lately. So I've kind of MIA from social media.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that you're able to show your Facebook lives when you can, because I'm like, oh, she's on. So I get like a little notification that you just went live a few minutes ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed her again. But when you are on there, I'm like, I just like, oh my God, there goes my sister again. She's like doing something beautiful. I just want to watch her in action. I'm just trying to give you as much energy from me, and hopefully, giving you the good vibes and encouraging other people to follow you, because you just have such a good, positive direction and calling, and so humble. You have so much passion in what you do. And I won't say, resilient, because that's just so humdrum, redundancy. But I see that you have so much passion for life and living within itself, and just being human, just being an actual old-fashioned human being should be. So you are the genuine.
Yes, it's very materialistic. And I'm just working on this decolonization stuff, so decolonizing myself, because they have been very successful in their missions. I was a fight promoter here for 20 years. I competed in the sport of boxing for 13 years, but I have been in the fight scene for 34 years before I finally retired from it. So I retired 2 years ago, and I stood in that cage because, we do MMA and boxing events. And I stood in that cage and I told a crowd of 450 people, this is my last show. I am stepping back, and that the sport of boxing and MMA has lifted me up for 20 years. And now I'm shifting my focus towards my culture. I'm shifting it to the language and the arts and things like that, because I didn't tell them this, but I was really tired of toeing the line and having to deal with certain people who were disrespectful, especially to a female promoter who, it took me time to gain respect from people. But once I started fighting like a man, they say, that's when I started getting men coming to me and asking me, can you train me? Can you corner coach me? And I mean, I've corner coached over 300 fights. I mean, in ballpark area, 300 fights of mostly boxing, and then MMA on top of it. Probably 125 fights were MMA. But so, yeah, I retired from that scene 2 years ago so that I could start doing this. So the Orange Shirt Day event was really my first coming out of retirement event for my Indigenous people.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
It was a great success.
Yes.
The weather was horrible.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
The morning was not too bad, actually. It was actually a good morning, but the evening was just like there was downpour, it was sideways, and we had some pop-up tents and all the beautiful people in the community who came together. And I can honestly say that at 49 years old, I have never felt love for my community ever until 2 days ago.
Right. Well, and you guys were just like a
beautiful group of,
yes,
Indigenous and non-Indigenous people who were just leaning in, trying to help with, what can we do? How can we listen? What can we learn? And
we need more of that
forward, because we're not done. That was just peeling off the first layer.
Yeah. This is only the beginning. You all were nice, beautiful droplets of sun. And I'm so happy that you were able to, it's like a coming out party, but it was all for, not just for you, it was for everything from the past, present, and future was all wrapped up in that moment. And it's so beautiful. And it's like you said, this is only the beginning. And I can't wait for other listeners to just say, you know what? I want to be part of that too.
Yeah. There's no separation between past, present, and future. People can say that, that stuff was in the past, but that stuff is like taking a pebble and throwing it into a pond. Something happens. There's this thing that happens. It's like the vibratory world. Mm-hmm. And so the pebble of the past of assimilation, segregation, and genocide, straight up genocide, has all these ripple effects that are present today and will continue into the future if we don't do something about them in this moment. And so, it's all past, present, and future. And so I'm just really hopeful that I get to see so much healing in my lifetime and watch this younger generation who is even more on this decolonization mission, because they understand what happened to us in the past, because it's only until recently where we started talking about it. We have this thing of community silence, and we have to, I guess it takes people like me and others, to stand up and break the silence and have the safety nets in place in order to carry us forward. So before this whole event went on, I know how traumatizing it is, because I've been digging into this stuff for 4 years. I should have a degree, but I don't. It's triggering. And suicide ideology was real for me for many years. I knew that we needed psychologists on board. We needed counseling ready to go. We need phone numbers for people to call. So we got all that stuff. We had it ready for this event to share with people. We had a talking circle with Dr. Tina Woods immediately right after at that school. The school was the Mayflower School, which did very harmful things to children who are still alive today. And in fact, one of the survivors, she walked into that school for the first time since her childhood. And she sat at that circle, and they processed. So the people who are running that school now, it used to be called the Mayflower School. Now it's the Juneau Montessori School. Mm-hmm. They are dedicated and committed to this community healing and providing space for people to go into, because that building holds very harmful memories. And if we can create something different out of that building, where people are coming in to heal and are getting different memories, then that's going to be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I remember seeing that TikTok of yours, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can feel it when you walked through there. You were touching the entryway, and you're walking, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one you were mentioning.
Yeah.
And you walked through there, and I was looking at the comments like, it's just a school. And like, well, no, that's not just a school. There was so much emotion just you walking in there, and I could feel it through the video. I almost got choked up, just emotions. You can feel so much that had happened there. It still just like impermeated through the walls of all the walls. Yeah, you can see that. I can feel it. It's just so. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm glad you are sharing all this information. And it's like you said, we are just peeling that layer of that onion with your continuation of decolonizing and having other people listening to the stories, and having the ability to understand and comprehend, and have that moment where you can be part of this. You can be part of this rising, this awareness, human love that we're lacking in this society. Human community, the human bond that has completely just been dwindled and diminished through centuries of,
the society needs us.
Yes, we do.
As people.
Absolutely.
It needs us in order for the healing to happen.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad.
Be dismissed and erased. Otherwise, there's not going to be anything left to dismiss and erase, I feel like. Especially with, line 3 going through, and people standing up against the current day colonizations of the oil lines, and trying to protect the water. There's a prophecy of that. The prophecy is not good. That black snake, and what it does detrimentally to the human race, to all of us. And if there's oil that leaks in that river, there's like 17 million people who are going to be displaced from water.
Yeah.
And water is life. If we don't have water, we're dead.
Water is life.
Our body is like, I don't know, how much percentage of water is it? 95% water?
Yeah.
You know? And
I think it's the same percentage of water that's on Earth is the exact same percentage of it of what the human body is made of. It's exactly the same percentage.
I love this background that you have because it does represent Mother Earth to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about decolonization, I struggle with organized religion so much because of the things that were done, and also understanding the doctrine of discovery of 1493 and all of the things that have happened since that doctrine of discovery. And it all has to do with industrialization and colonization. So there's a big perspective for everyone to start looking at. If you want to decolonize, go there. So I think, Mother Earth, the one true provider of life. It's not some mystery person in the sky to me. It's what we walk on, because that is the true giver of life. It grows all of the plants. It has the water, all the animals. And if we just continue killing it, then we're killing ourselves.
Exactly. So true. So again, it's been an honor. I really enjoy spending so much beautiful time with you, Jamiann, and it's
fun.
Yes, it's been fun, and it's been very educational. Hopefully the listeners are learning something above and beyond what they have been taught in schools. This is something that we need to crack open and be more aware of. And I am so happy to have you as a guest on my podcast. So,
sheesh, that means thank you in easy terms, but really, Gwyneth Sheesh means this would not be possible without you. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for today.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Noise Paloo Zion podcast. I'm Jasmine Castillo, also known as DJ Jim Jam. If you are wanting to be promoted on my podcast, please reach out to me if you are a small business, entrepreneur, musician, or artist. www.jasminecastillovoice.com. Stay tuned for the next upcoming episode.